Okay, thank you, everyone. We're ready to start. It's just 4:30, so we're ready to start this meeting of the Shareholder Committee. I'm just going to explain at the beginning that Councillor Douglas needs to give her apologies for item number 8. We've got Councillor Gillane who will be subbing for Councillor Douglas just for that item. So we are going to take that item first. After we've done the...
Sorry, Chair, your mic's turned off.
We are going to take that item first after we've done the minutes and the exclusion of the press and public decision, just so that we can manage that that substitution. And then Councillor Douglas will return and we'll go through all the rest of the items on the agenda in their original order. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to raise this during the actual item. So just to ask the question, why is that? Because it was my understanding that...
Yeah, that's going to come up in the next section,
Okay.
Declarations of interest.
Maybe dodgy microphones to stop.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's come on now. So don't. Yeah, might as well just. Hopefully that one will stay stuck on. Okay, we move now to declarations of interest. Councillor Douglas.
Mine's on red.
What's going on? Sorry.
This is the chairs.
Okay, so I think we're okay for now. So my declaration of interest is around item 8, Make It York update, and that's because I'm now the nominated director of Make It York. So I'm going to withdraw myself from discussion of that, and Councillor Corbane, who is not a director, will sit in my place during that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That was my question, and apologies I didn't pick this up in June when it actually happened. We had always been advised as a council that members of the shareholder committee could not sit as directors on technical companies, and that's always been, and clearly that was working to a point, and then there was a change, I suspect because Councillor Kilbane took on the portfolio responsibility, which then meant that he could no longer sit on the board. So that bit has worked, but then obviously we've put somebody on who is on the shareholder committee, which is something else that we're advised that we're not supposed to do. So we'll be looking to make sure that no members of the shareholder committee sit as directors on technical companies going forward, because that was the advice we've always had from the monitoring officer.
Well, we haven't had such advice from the monitoring officer, but I will go away and ask for that and report back. They're very important discussions, so we'll absolutely make sure that happens. Thank you. Next is the minutes of the meeting on the 24th of June.
Chair, sorry, we seem to be having technical difficulties. Do you mind just adjourning for like a minute? I just need to sort that out. Sorry, we seem to be, the mic seems to be having an issue.
We're just going to adjourn for a moment to sort out the microphones. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Apologies for that short break. We were having difficulties with the microphones, which, believe it or not, resolved. But if it happen again, we may have to take another couple of minutes for our team to try to sort that out, because it's important that everyone's able to hear what's happening, whether in the room or watching this later. So I was just about to talk about minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of June. Is there anything that anyone wants to raise with those minutes? No, everybody happy for me to sign them? Yes, Marcus, I shall sign those at the end of the meeting. The next item that we have to consider is the exclusion of the press and public from specific elements. So it is agenda item number 7, appendix 1, agenda item 8, appendix 2, and agenda item 9, annex A, on the grounds that they contain information relating to financial or business affairs of a particular person. So I'm going to propose that we exclude press and public from those items. We'll continue through the agenda, and when we get to the main agenda items, we'll first have any discussion that involves the publicly shared papers. Sorry, no. Oh, no, back. We'll make sure it's in the publicly shared papers, and then I shall ask the committee if they've got any questions to ask about the. No, sorry, I think this.
Sorry, I think what I might have to adjourn just a minute again. I'm so sorry.
So I'll just finish this, and then we'll try to sort the microphones out. And then I'll ask the committee if they wish to discuss anything that's in the excluded documents, and if there is, we'll pause at that point to deal with that, and then come back into session. When looking at the agenda, I couldn't see a way to fairly rearrange the agenda to accommodate everyone. Is everybody happy with that arrangement? And yes. Yes. Okay, I think we're going to pause again there to just try and sort these microphones out. Apologies, everyone.
I think it's something wrong with the receiver.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're now on plan B for sound, so hopefully that will work. Just might be helpful for everyone as you're presenting to raise your voice as much as you are comfortable to do, and hopefully the microphone will pick it up. Our next item on the agenda is public participation, and we don't have any public speakers this evening, so I'm going to go straight on then to Make It York. Councillor Douglas is going to leave the room at this point. Councillor Kilbane will be substituting for her, and Councillor Douglas will rejoin us after this item. Okay, so Sarah, over to you.
I'm just going to focus mainly on two things, which is around the finance and the governance arrangements. which I think this committee is most interested in. I'm pleased to announce that we're now financially strong and have moved back into a position of solvency, which I think is really good news after about 2.5 years. The financial year for this year has started really strong, and we're currently ahead of budget. So we've got no concerns about how we operate in the future. We've also got strong governance in place, which I know a couple of years ago when I started, the committee had concerns about. We're in the process of going through appointing a new chair since Greg Dyke resigned last year, and we put a temporary chair in post for a year. The interviews for that post will take place at the end of this month. So hopefully we will appoint somebody and bring that appointment through due process. We've achieved good business charter for the second year running, which is really good news, which shows that we've got everything in order that we should have in order and are punching above our weight as a business in the city. We are really transparent about measuring our impact. Again, another thing that was of concern to this committee. And we produce regular reports to the council on our performance today against our service level agreement and against all the other activities, which that is included in the report that's been presented. And I think what it shows is that we are giving good value to both residents, visitors, stakeholders and customers through the work that we do through Make It York. This year we produced our annual report as in a digital format so that we could reduce our carbon footprint and make it a bit more exciting and interesting for people to see what we are actually achieving. Our retention for membership is the highest in the history of Make It York, that's now sitting at 93%. And our strategy this year has been to maintain our existing members and to not focus too much on new members. And that's proven positive, both in terms of the service that we provide and the income stream stabilises our income stream in terms of membership. As you can see in the report, online reach and campaigns go from strength to strength. We have some fabulous campaigns. Just this month, our Halloween campaign reached 1 million people within 3 days of it going live. So I think that shows how successful we are in what we do and the information that we promote York on, that there's a real interest out there. And if you haven't seen it, I'd hope that you look online and see our haunted campaign. It's really good fun. Our focus this year has been on international trade. And now that we're in a position of solvency, we're able to attend some of the World Travel Market and other events abroad to get that international tourists back into York, because we know that they are the highest spenders, they look after the city and they promote how good York is to the world. Our figures in terms of visitors have increased and are increasing. Footfall is higher than the national average. So again, I think the work that we are doing is really proving successful for the city. So they're the key points that I wanted to raise. There's lots of statistics in the report, and if people want to ask me questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Sarah. Anybody else want to add anything before we go to questions? No. Okay. Questions, comments? Councillor Eyre?
Trying to avoid getting people out of the room. So the question is about paragraph 9, but then refers to something of confidential animals, which I don't believe necessarily be confidential, but it's about the current year position. And obviously, paragraph 9 says that the current operational year position again indicates ahead of the budgeted position. The confidential annex explains why that is. I have a question about that. Is there any way you can explain what's on page 2 in a public way that will then avoid us having to go into?
The reason why we wouldn't publish the position that we're at at the moment is because that could change dramatically on some of the activity that we do. We're confident that it won't, but we don't want to declare that at the moment.
I think there's a specific reason why you're so far ahead of budget that I wanted to ask a question about.
Then
If
in
that
that
has to be
case, then-
confidential, then
yeah.
I'll just, sure.
Okay. Is there any other questions anyone has on any of the public information pack? Councillor Kilbane?
It's just force of habit, isn't it?
Yeah.
You want to press that button every time, don't you? Because you normally get shouted at for not pressing the button, don't you? So, just a couple of questions. One, in terms of the published accounts, obviously there's been a saving in salaries. Is that, do you think that'll be a permanent, or is that just waiting to fill vacancies?
Waiting to fill vacancies.
Okay. And the other thing that jumped out at me is what are Durham doing? Because they've gone through the roof, haven't they? With they're up 10% in terms of visitor numbers. Do we any idea what it is? Is it particular attraction? Is it Lumiere? Is it what's going on with them?
They're part of the Visit England DDP, so they've received a huge amount of funding by being part of a destination partnership as opposed to an LVET. So they were a pilot scheme set up and were given a huge amount of central funding to be able to do additional activity.
Okay.
Anything else on any of the public information? No, and I don't have any questions about the public information. So in that case, we'll now go into private session to answer any questions on the restricted information. So apologies, colleagues. I'm going to ask you to leave while we do this, and then we'll come back into public session as soon as that discussion has happened.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to go.
Right, welcome back everybody. Thank you for bearing with us while we just went into private session there. I'm just going to check if there are any final questions or comments. Councillor Kilbane?
Just to clarify from the report, really. So the profit for the year 2003-2004 was nearly 300,000. But of that, about 230,000 was the insurance, the COVID insurance claim. So the operating profit is 57, something like that. Okay, and that's from a position where you were making a considerable loss a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's worth noting, isn't it? So congratulations to all the team and everybody involved in turning it around and making it a successful outfit financially.
Anything else? No, in that case, our recommendation is to note the report and the annexes, which I'm happy to do. Councillor Kilbane, happy to.
Yeah, happy with that, Chair. Yeah.
That's great. We thank you very much, and we thank Councillor Kilbane for stepping in. And Councillor Kilbane, if you can just switch with Councillor Douglas, and we'll let you go back in.
What this subbing at meetings is great.
Councillor Douglas is back. We'll move on now to Yorwaste. Sandy. Okay, over to you, Sandy.
Okay, so you've got the report. I think number one, as I've said, boring number of times before, is our boilerplate, just to make sure that anyone who's not familiar with the business understands the different ways which you bring value, because technical companies aren't incredibly sort of understood by everybody. So if there's any no questions on point number one, point number two, I've managed to pad out this pack with the annual accounts. So I think they're publicly available now on Companies House. If there's any questions relating to those, they're related to the last fiscal year. We've already covered most of the items that we'd normally talk about within that. But if there's anything specific you want to bring out, we can have a chat about that.
Any questions from anyone on the accounts? Councillor Eyre.
I'm very surprised. It was the significant increase in tax, I think, was what I was thinking.
Movement in tax reserves. There's no charge because we've got brought forward tax losses, and we've got super capital discounts. So between the two of those means we don't actually pay cash out, and we've still got some accumulated reserves, which means you will have a tax charge because we're making profit, but it's not a tax outflow from the business. And if we don't use those accumulated tax losses and those capital charges, then we will end up paying tax. So it's actually a good thing rather than a bad thing. Okay.
Councillor Douglas. No, you don't need that.
We've
switched to
I remember.
microphones, Councillor Douglas.
So Sandy, how is the recycler market going, and where do you see that heading at this point in time compared to previous years?
Compared to previous years, well, it's volatile. It's always been volatile. Sometimes you get periods of calm. Of late, I think we've seen the sort of plastic market have a few problems, and there's been changes to the, what's the word I'm looking for? We used to have a Todd pack for them. Todd pack. Remember that thing? PRNs, product recycling notes. So I think we've changed some of the PRNs for the rest of the year, which has brought that market back up. But generally speaking, the market seems to, it will respond in line with government, with demand, basically. So if you've got a fairly buoyant GDP, you'll have more sort of use for them, and you'll have a better price. I think things are starting to sort of cool off a little bit, which is why you're seeing a little bit of a drop in prices of late. Whether that bounces back up, if I knew that, I'd be making a lot more money than I am now. So.
Thanks. Anything else on that section?
The trick here, though, the trick is always about the quality of the recycler. There's a rather interesting article in The Economist where I think somebody's actually sort of went and had a look at one of the sites that no you have, and you'll sort of see sort of part of the challenges that we've got is the quality and cleanliness of the recycler. So if people keep it clean, right, then you've got a much better chance of bringing it in. So no nappies, no pizza boxes. There's a big list on, I'm assuming, on your internet, which will explain it. But the more we can encourage people to do that, the better quality it is, the better price you'll get. But we do quite well on that. So
how's that going? Is there more that we could be doing, do you think, to ensure that?
York does well.
Mhm.
Some of the other sort of districts, as they would have been in the old days for North Yorkshire, are a bit of a mixed bag. But on the whole, across the entire patch, we are better than many of other sort of areas. We used to process some out of area recycling for another council, which was so heavily contaminated that it was quite frequently treated as normal rubbish. And that's because people weren't separating it, they were putting rubbish like nappies, like dead cats, like sort of, pizza boxes with pizzas and other stuff in there. So, but to be fair to the City of York, they do quite well. And I think, as I've said in previous ones, there does seem to be a bit of a correlation between the cleanliness and sort of cleanliness of the recycler and the sort of demographics within the organisation, within that particular region. The higher the demographics, the more likely people are to go that extra bit to separate out what needs to be separated, or to make sure cleaning the recycler is actually going into it. So.
Yeah, and I think it also is testament to the hard work that the comms team have been doing recently. They've totally revamped making the communications far more kind of user friendly and clearer and more interactive, and I think it seems to be being picked up and works. So
the next area, ironically, the areas the worst area for recycling is actually commercial recycling. And that's because a lot of businesses, let me be careful if I say this. Some businesses are better at it than others, and some businesses use it as an opportunity to reduce their total waste cost by putting normal waste in with their recycling, i.e. hiding it under the top bag of recycling. And that then creates contamination rates that would exceed what you'd get from your domestic collections. But we've got plans in place for that.
okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
So that's
And I note that we've just received as residents, we've just received or will be receiving this week our waste update, which includes a reminder about recycling, separation and cleanliness. So hopefully that will help as well.
yeah. Good. So that's number 2. Number 3, I think, in terms of our current performance. So I sent this report in about a week ago. So we're probably about 247, maybe 250 days, I think, or so, without any LTIs, which is pretty good. It's not our record, but it's getting up there, so that's pretty good. And we've also recently got the Rosper Gold Medal Award, which you get for 5 years of consistent performance under the Rosper Gold standard. In terms of our landfill gas revenues, they have fallen, but we've actually done a pretty good job of controlling some of our costs. So some of the costs that we incurred for infrastructure last year, we are no longer incurring. So we've sort of saved those costs year on year, which combined with increased sort of retention of the third-party recycling and also increasing our commercial sales means that we are on course at the for the half-year point of being in line with where we were last year, which was around about the 1.3, 1.4 million. I'm not going to say that we'll be about ahead of that because that would be tempting fate, but let's just say at this point, absent any unforeseen circumstances and cautious optimistic of a better result than that the full year. So, in terms of the government waste strategy,
That's ahead of where you expected to be, isn't it?
That's ahead of last year. I mean, that we were expecting to be much closer towards the break even, but we've actually really pulled out of the hat in terms of our cost savings. Okay. And I think, in all honesty, when we were looking at budgeting for the current year, there were certain one-off items within our infrastructure costs relating to fixing concrete and fixing drainage that haven't replicated. So in that instance, we've actually managed to sort of save that cost year on year, which means we've actually got a better underlying business than I might have previously sort of spotted in the last one. That combined with the fact our commercial sales are up and we've retained that third-party recycling. So all of that is good news for us, and I think we've got a below inflation rate for our council increases as well. So
great, thank you. Thanks.
So on to the government waste strategy. I think the key thing here is simpler recycling. For City of York, we're still, you're not changing your method, and we are geared up at Harewood to be able to process that. That's not a problem. For North Yorkshire, they're going to make their decision on their simpler recycling model in November at their full council. If they adopt a similar approach to York, then we can look to sort of put all of that processing material through Harewood, which will allow economies of scale, that will allow us to invest a little bit more in that facility, which will improve the picking rates as well. So we'll look for a hybrid of optical sorts and manual sorts, which would allow us to take all that processing through there, because it's more than double the current, around double the current sort of capacity we'll be going through there. If North Yorkshire adopts this, won't all be happening on day one, but over the next couple of years we'll transition towards that. And we'll need to do some additional investment at Harewood to do that. So that would be good.
Just a sec, Councillor Ayer's got a question, I think.
Yeah, keep pressing that. Yeah, it was specific about that question. That's what I was trying to dig at. Because that second paragraph in there is quite cryptic. So when you say, however, this is,
I wouldn't want to prejudge the outcome of North Yorkshire's democratic process in reaching a conclusion.
So that is relating to North Yorkshire's democratic.
If North Yorkshire were to take a different route, it would not hugely impact what it's doing, so be able to provide the same service for York.
Oh,
Okay, great.
And then in terms of sort of climate change, there's only one outstanding objection, which is painfully slow and being processed with. Assuming that can be dealt with as soon as that's done, it will go to planning, and then hopefully we can get some progress on that. So, and outside of that, we're putting some solar on top of Thirsk, which is all part of that little incremental to become net zero electricity by 2030, which if we can get the planning permission for Harewood, I'm cautiously optimistic won't be a problem. So,
great.
And then in terms of governance, there's all of our reaccreditation under the ISOs. We've got our good business charter, and not included in here, but next year we'll go for reaccreditation under 5-star health and safety audit. So basically, no huge major problems. Lots of opportunities arising out of potential change, decisions about simpler recycling. And there's a few other things that we're looking at in terms of our composting, all of which are contingent on each other. So once some of those jigsaw puzzles come into place, probably come February, I'll be able to give you a better idea as to what the next steps are. It will require some investment and some cash that we don't have. So we will almost certainly need to increase our borrowings if we're going to do that. But all of those projects are cash return. You know, I think the longest one is 8 years, right? A lot of the other ones are 3 or 4 years, and they'll ultimately be for the long-term benefit of the sort of both authorities and the sort of local taxpayer.
We look forward to hearing about those soon.
Yeah,
Councillor
thank you.
Douglas.
Yeah, just to go back to a conversation we've just had about the Armed Forces Covenant, where does that fit within? When's your reaccreditation coming up, or what are your timeframes on that under?
So we're scored under silver.
Yeah.
We're not as big an organisation as York. We've got about 280 staff, so we almost need to sort of ration it. We're also, you know, quite thin on the ground. We're a lean, mean management machine, and on that basis, we need to sort of prioritise it. So what we've done in addition, since we've got the silver accreditation, we've done work with the homeless charter in terms of sort of, you know, trying to get homeless people back into work. We've done work with local prisons to try and get prisoners back into work. We were speaking to Councillor Melly about the care leavers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, getting that right. But, I'm always thinking of caregivers. First time I'd like to place care leavers, but we understand that, and we're sort of going to look at that. So we just don't have the bandwidth to do everything. Going for gold is on our list at some point. We'll just get to it once we've ticked off some of these other ones, which I think are a little bit more imminent, and we'll get to other lists. Obviously, we think that the new legislation in terms of workers' rights later this year is almost certainly going to put a greater requirement for us to put more HR staff on, given some of the sort of challenges that will spring up within the workplace. So.
Yeah, and that's really good too. So thanks for that update. And actually, I think these things are things that, as TCAL companies associated with the council, that we should be talking more about, you know, because it's a really positive benefit to the city of York, but also our outlying areas. And given that, you know, it's up into
we're very happy participating in them. I will put a little bit of a realpolitik on it, whereas we're even within some of those disadvantaged communities, we don't seem to be the #1 destination for people to want to go and work. A lot of people still don't like the idea of working on a household waste site or on the bins. I think I'm not quite sure why, because I think we're a good employer. We look after our staff, and certainly people we have enjoy it, but there's still that societal block for some people. So,
and I think some of these schemes are the way that you get through that, because as soon as you make yourself an employer of choice, then you will get that into the minds of people that we think that these jobs are great jobs.
I mean, on the upside, our churn's gone from over 35% to high teens, low 20s. So we've made some steps, but we've still got quite a way to go. And a lot of that churn is within the very young group. I think so that once people have got a few years under their belt work-wise, they then have more realistic expectations of what to expect. Whereas I think some of the young people still a little bit coming to the work with
a lot to learn.
A lot of optimism, shall we say. So.
And just on the care leavers that you mentioned, you know, we all are corporate parents, so we all have responsibility to young people who have been through the care system in York, and I'm really glad to hear that you're talking about that within your board structure. And what we're trying to achieve at the moment is to give work opportunities and work experience opportunities as well for care leavers, in order to help them to build positive relationships with the workplace, but also habits around work too. So please, I'd be more than happy to see how we can support you in any of that work that you're doing. Because as you say, you are a great employer, and we need to shout about that. So thank you for all of that, and thanks to your team as well.
Any other questions?
No. Then are we happy to note the report as per the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy, and thanks for bearing with us while we just
Not a problem.
rejigged.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. We'll next move on to item 6, the YPO update. So I welcome Simon.
Thank you, Chair.
Great to have you with us to give us an update on YPO. So I'll hand over to you to do whatever presentation you wish to us, and then I'm sure there'll be questions, this being your first visit for some time. So
it is, yeah, it's an annual appearance nowadays. Yeah. Hopefully you've been looking forward to this for a whole year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. Billy, you've had the report circulated. Just again, as a reminder, structurally, York is one of the 13 local authorities across the north of England who are members of the Joint Committee rather than the company, which makes up the majority of YPO's business. There is a limited company that sits alongside it, which has no assets, no employees, and is purely a trading mechanism for dealing with those aspects of public provision that have been privatised and legislation haven't really caught up with, and that's things like nurseries and care homes. So our mission is very much the provision of public services. We don't really step outside of that. We're currently in the 3rd year of the strategy that was approved by members in November 21. Again, as a reminder, we have a calendar financial year, so we're coming nearly to the end of year 3. The strategy was called Invest for Growth and was really on the back of our emergence from COVID. From those couple of years that were challenging for everybody for various reasons. And we found ourselves in a position of having been stripped of cash as an organisation because our costs remained the same, but the education market particularly was largely closed for much of that time. Also need to actually replace some aging legacy systems that were no longer supported externally and commercially. And really also to catch up with the fact that during those couple of years, the whole world went digital and went online. So we've had to pivot pretty quickly from being a catalogue retailer to an online retailer. And that really is how we see ourselves, that kind of digital first philosophy now. In order to do that, we have a pretty ambitious growth strategy. We're recognizing that of the two parts of the business, so supply of physical resources into education, pens, pencils, exercise books, desks, so on, and then framework contracts into local government. In education, because we've been doing this for 50 years, have a very strong pedigree and very high level of penetration and saturation of that market, the potential for growth is limited. We're still pursuing that. But that's going to be single figure growth, really taking market share off other competitors. On the other hand, on the procurement services side of things, on framework contracts, there is still tremendous potential for us to increase what we call spend under management. So local government spend that goes through framework or through contract spend, on which we don't manage the transaction, but we earn a rebate which is paid by the supplier on that business, and we think there's huge potential there. So over the period of the strategy period that I'm talking about, we see a 300% growth in profit contribution from framework rebate income. I've talked about the fact that we essentially support the provision of public service, and yet we talk quite unapologetically about profit. And I don't think that there's a conflict there, because profit for us is a proxy for efficient growth. It would be very easy to grow the spend under management of the service that we provide by throwing huge resource at it. And that's not good use of public funding, really. So if we do that profitably and grow the margin, it means we're doing that efficiently with controlling costs, controlling overheads, and maximising the amount of dividend that we can pay back into the public purse through the dividend that we pay to our member authorities. And as you'll know, with the current financial squeeze, that helps pay for frontline services like social work, child protection, and so on. So it is consistent with that kind of mission-based activity of YPO. It's going well, and we, in the first year, we had a target of 7 million profit. We hit that on the nose. Last year, 8.5, we actually achieved 8 against that. This year is 10. So you can see the results of that investment that we made in the early years starting to flow through into profit, and that efficiency that I've talked about, particularly the systems investment that we've made. And at this point, there's only 2 trading months really left at this point. We see no reason that 10 million shouldn't be achieved. And again, all of these are published figures. We haven't published this paper in private because we are also kind of committed to transparency and openness. The strategy is published on our website, and all of our financial figures the same. I've been taking questions on that section at this point, Chair, before moving on to procurement.
Any questions, Councillor Douglas?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for presenting that so clearly and being open about how the numbers go. That's a really good news story, isn't it? From your perspective, I'm sure you're quite happy with that performance. And so what does that translate through into as far as dividend out into the local authorities of your profit? I assume that's includes everything, isn't it?
Difficult to be specific. I'm not being evasive, but I'll describe it as best I can. So 30% of the total dividend that we distribute is ring-fenced for the 13 member authorities. And that is essentially your reward for underwriting the risk as shareholders. The remaining balance is based on spend, so it's an incentive scheme effectively. For York, recently, I think we would have paid you 350 to 400,000 probably last year, and that will be about the same this year because the change that we've made to the ring fencing to protect ourselves while we rebuild cash reserves and while we do the investment meant that actually we smooth the curve. So you should see similar this year again, I would expect.
Thanks, and so thank you for that. That's really helpful and good to see. And with increasing profit, then there's more coming back into the organisation, which is good. I'm going to ask you about the tricky issue now that we have had. You know, growing the business, great.
Yeah.
But York is a city of human rights city.
Yes.
And we had a disagreement on the business plan most recently when one of your highlighted markets for expansion is UAE. And so we chose not to support the business plan because of that. And so what I would say, you know, I've run my own business for 16 years. I've done it. I've been there. It wasn't a public service as yours is. And I totally agree that profit in this respect is not a bad thing and it supports the local authorities. But I still do think that we have to think about how we do business as an authority in the public service at the same time. And I'd like to just ask you to have a think about that expansion, yes, but not expansion at all costs. And we are expected and we will continue to represent the views of our citizens on these kind of issues. And so that's not going to change. Sure. And where we see that a country has a particularly poor human rights record, it would be impossible for us to support that kind of expansion. So I just wanted to say that to you. And then we started a conversation about some of the initiatives that we've got going on in York around our Armed Forces Covenant, our care leavers that Sandy mentioned, and various other schemes to try and encourage a broad and diverse workforce and also opportunities for all different types of people. And I'm just wondering what you're doing at the moment around that and whether any of the other authorities have asked you similar questions.
They haven't, to be fair. May I just address your first point?
Yes, yeah, of course, please. Yeah, do.
So the business that we do in United Arab Emirates is not new. So I suppose I would slightly challenge the terminology that it's not particularly expansion. So that's been going on for 5 years. When we established the limited company, we were approached by international expatriate schools. So the business that we do in Dubai, and it is pretty much exclusively Dubai, is to large chains of international schools that essentially educate expats living in Dubai and use the English education system. And therefore, lots of the teachers are familiar with us having emigrated over there. It amounts to about 350,000 a year. So in terms, compared to the 128 million that goes through the Management Joint Committee, it's very coincidental. And we don't actively market it. It comes to us as approaches from people that are familiar with us, having dealt with us in this country. And we have no plans to expand it, but it has come to us coincidentally over the last 5 years. But I completely take the point about the need for ethical trading and making sure that we consider that in everything we do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
On the care leavers, yes, we are engaged with Wakefield Council on that. So because we're a joint committee and not a legal entity, Wakefield Council act as lead authority and are essentially the employer for us. I'm an employee of Wakefield Council. They're all on local government terms. And therefore our relationship with Wakefield, both for kind of provision of apprenticeships, is very strong. And also we are engaged with them about care leavers as well. We have employed a number of those over the last 4 years, I think, to date. Armed services leavers, I'm not aware of any engagement of that amount. Again, that's going to be an interesting conversation, and I'll take it on board.
Great, thank you, thanks.
Any other questions?
Like to pick up the procurement.
Oh, yeah,
activity?
yeah.
So we.
I will come to you, councillor.
Oh, sorry, councillor.
This bit on the next page is, thank you for introducing the word waterfall chart as a vocabulary. It's not something
Every day is school day. Thank goodness for us.
Issue I had was, be this the council IT system or your report or my eyesight.
It's rubbish.
The resolution is quite poor. So I didn't really, and it was kind of the key piece of information, I couldn't really get anything out of it. So if you could perhaps say what your top 3 points of highlight from that particularly beautiful graphic.
Yeah, even with glasses, I'm struggling, so I do take that.
1.1 is stop.
Yeah, so I mean, the principle here is that you start with a target figure, there are negative influences and positive influences that can go through the year, and then the net effect of those positive and negative influences based on different categories gives you what the prediction is on the right hand side. So start with 10 million, various influences. As I've said, we still expect that will end up with 10 million. I suppose the biggest, the green, the 1.1 million is increasing gross margin on stock. So we invested in a piece of software that enables us to benchmark in real time what competitors are selling similar products for on their websites. And one of the things that's changed from being a catalogue provider where you spend a lot of money and a lot of time printing an annual catalogue once, fixed prices, those days are gone. Okay, and the online retail business is much more dynamic, much more real time. We need to be able to flex our prices in real time to account for cost increase, make sure that we're not losing money on them, but also making sure we're competitive and producing the best value for our public sector customers. And the fact that we're able to monitor that in real time and constantly adjust has flowed through into significant impact on us being able to make more marginal products.
Interesting question, because I operated retail business at one point and had a similar issue with software. I thought it was brilliant at the time because I was having to manually review and adjust pricing, and then got a piece of software that did it. What I discovered then the problem was if everybody gets the same piece of software, you drive 50% off the value of the product in a matter of days, because you listed at £10, they track you, find you, and within 12 hours and listed at £8.50. And then yours does the same and takes it to £8. So just to reassure that we're checking that doesn't.
Absolutely. So I think if we kind of left it to the software with an algorithm that said just do the adjustment, that would be a disaster. What it gives us is intelligence and information on which we can make a judgment as to what's the sensible thing to do, because you don't want to be varying prices on a daily basis. That's not good for time poor teachers who are trying to place an order and don't know where they're going if your prices are all over the place. But you also need over time to make sure that you maintain competitiveness across the basket. So the buying team, our team is very similar to kind of merchandising team in a supermarket. It's that kind of skill of taking judgments based on the intelligence they get and setting prices going forward, trying to make stability where we can, but doing the kind of tweaks at the edges. But I recognise the changes that you described, and then the negative has been people costs. Half of that is due to the central negotiated Green Book salary increases. So we are subject to the national negotiation, joint negotiating committee. We provided for that based on experience, and that wages have gone up more than we anticipated.
Good luck with that process.
Yes, it's one of those. We're quite heavily unionised, and it's one of those that when our trade unions go to protest against the national negotiations, we're kind of all in the same boat, really, because I have no involvement or say in that whatsoever. So we find ourselves quite aligned with them. So
Unionised workforce is a marvellous thing.
it is.
And always gratifying to hear. Any more questions?
So on the procurement side, I think we'll just address that briefly. There's a bit of a perfect storm going on at the moment in local governments, procurement functions. They have a huge pipeline of procurements to carry out. They have a huge number of vacancies. So the capacity across the public sector procurement profession generally is very stretched. And there's a brand new set of procurement regs. So what used to be the European procurement regulations obviously being replaced with the new Procurement Act, just been deferred. It was supposed to go live next month, been deferred until February 25 at this point, but who knows. So it's a difficult time. And this is where centrally owned procurement functions such as ourselves can really help in challenging circumstances. So we're recruiting a new consultancy and training function, unbudgeted actually, so that is part of that other excessive people costs, Councillor, that we talked about. So this is a bit of investment speculatively, because we believe that we can be real help here. That will both do training, and we're looking at a procurement academy to help train member authority procurement officers. We are doing placements and secondments, so we currently have 3 members of staff and secondments in North Yorkshire, for example, but I think there's more opportunity there as well, and picking up bespoke pieces of procurement and consultancy work. I think the principle there is that this expenditure will probably have to take place in councils anyway, and we would rather that is spent within a public sector organisation such as YPO, where our margins are cheaper anyway, our day rates will be cheaper, and the benefits of that are recirculated within the public person, paid back out as dividend, than paid out to expensive private corporate blue chip consultancies. So to some extent, we're kind of setting up in competition with that, because we think there is room in the market for a public sector provider for this kind of service at the moment. And finally, on the SME supply market, so obviously of great importance to local authorities such as yourself, not just what are we doing and what are we spending, but where are we spending it and who's getting the benefit of that. So making sure that we're maximising the opportunity for small businesses in York to participate in our tenders. Very important. We've engaged a company called Go for Growth, who essentially run training and hand-holding sessions for small businesses to go through what can be a daunting prospect of tendering for public sector contracts, and making sure that you can't skew the outcome of an independent objective procurement. What you can do is ensure that as many people that you want to from the local economy enter the start of that process. That's definitely something that we can influence, and are putting a lot of effort into doing so at the moment. And the final thing on new initiatives, social care market. So when I talk to finance directors and chief execs across the 13 authorities, the biggest thing on their headache list at the moment is the amount of money that is being spent on social care through a market which has a bit of a stranglehold on authorities who have statutory obligations on them for things like placing an at-risk child in very short notice, and that sense of urgency is reflected in the pricing structure. No individual authority really has the strength or the critical mass to take on the market and try to influence that. But this is something that a buying consortium, where you're combining that market power, and perhaps spreading the risk of any activity that you take to forward buy and to actually kind of fixed price can be quite valuable. It won't be an overnight fix. This is a very tough long-term issue that has been challenging authorities for many years. But we feel it's something where YPO as a buying consortium can really make a difference. So we're just starting to invest in some studies to see what does the business case look like, and we'll come back to members. I would expect that to be in the first quarter of next year, before we've got some concrete proposals. But I think that's the, we've talked a lot about the kind of the commercialism and commercial success. I think we also need to look at what can we do with the power that the buying consortium has to address some of the social issues that are facing local authorities at the moment.
So I'm really pleased to hear about the support for the SMEs, because with the new procurement rules, this is making it harder and harder for them to, well, it's supposed to make it easier, but it's a big change and very demanding. So
I think it's a missed opportunity by the Cabinet Office. But honestly, we worked very hard to maintain the kind of dynamic procurement system concept that was there before, and it's largely been lost under the new regs. So I think that you're right, the challenge for SMEs will be harder. So we need to put more effort into helping.
So can I ask you, locally in York, then, are you speaking to our economic growth team and also the Combined Authority York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority Growth Hub?
Yes.
In order to make sure that SMEs know what you're doing and how they can benefit from.
Yeah, so I had a meeting in these offices with the Combined Authority a couple of weeks ago. Also with the Chamber of Commerce and with the Federation of Small Business, because they're also a useful channel to have this dialogue.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you. It's good to know that that's going on. And then just on the new initiatives, I suppose what I would say is our local experience on children's services placements. I totally recognise what you're talking about. I know it's a huge national issue, but we are really driving locally to keep children and young people in York close to their networks. And so really that's what we should be aiming for the whole country to do. And, you know, for some places that obviously is far bigger challenge than for others, but we're being quite successful at it. And so when you're setting up these processes, I would like you to keep alert to the fact that really what the best outcome for children and young people is to be kept close to their networks and not forcing down prices in, you know, pick it out of the hat. I don't know, Brighton, say, for example, that a York child potentially would go to Brighton. So it's quite a complex environment to get the best outcome for children as well. And then also temporary labour supply, that's another thing that we're driving down. And Karen, poor old Karen sat at the back there. Her business is affected by that because we don't feel as though it's the best way to go for our workforce, but understand that there are certain roles that, you know, it will never disappear, but we're trying to minimise it. So I just say that to you for mindfulness of, you know, unintended consequences of what you're trying to do.
Completely recognise that, and I think I would argue that there's a link between the two. That the reason that children are often placed outside local area is price driven. And if you can actually fix the price and level that across geography, then you're more likely to be able to place children locally without succumbing to that price pressure that is can be used as a weapon to leave it by the private sector market.
Yeah,
so
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Simon? No, in that case, happy to note the report, and we thank you very much for it.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll next move on to Veritau business update. And again, this is one where we have restricted Appendix 1. So we'll go through what is the publicly shared information, and I'll give an opportunity to indicate if there's any questions on the restricted information. Go ahead, Max.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So obviously this is our business update since the last meeting in June. The main focus of our work has been in that period has been the creation of the new Veritau company, Veritau Public Sector Limited. I'm pleased to say that did go live on the 1st of August. The company currently has 4 member councils, including York, with a further 2 councils in the process of being onboarded. At that point, we'll then have the sort of expected number that we sort of started out with. Part of that process, all the staff who were employed by the two Veritau trading companies, as well as the two members of staff who transferred in from Leicestershire County Council. So all the staff have been transferred across to BPS now. The company's set up and operating, which means that Veritau Limited, which is the former company, that's now operating on a commercial basis. So that's delivering services to councils and schools, but for a profit, for the benefit of the member councils. So Veritau, whilst that has been pretty much the main focus, we have continued to gain new clients. We've been bidding for work, and that's going quite well. We've also had our Good Business Charter accreditation renewed, like Yorwaste, and we've had our external audit of last year's accounts completed. So that process has just finished. I've summarised the results in the paper, and the accounts themselves for Veritau Limited are attached. I think it's just overall, last year was a pretty good year. We saw an increase in our fee income of about 22%, and our profit was ahead of target. And we achieved most of the key business development actions that we were expecting to do. So overall, I think it's a good year. The draft accounts are attached. I would just say that they do include a whole series of accounting adjustments to reflect our membership of the local government pension scheme. So the figures themselves take some understanding and translating back to what we view as the true operating position. I can try and explain what those adjustments are, but effectively, whilst our management accounts, operating accounts showed a profit of about 52k, there's then a negative series of adjustments which in total create a sort of negative reduction of 96k. So the accounts, the published accounts will show a loss, but that's mostly down to these pension adjustments. We've just had last week we had our Veritau Limited board meeting, which signed off the annual report. So I'll be able to bring that to the next meeting. This committee that just goes into a bit more detail about the areas of work that we're doing, the sort of the clients we've gained, and so on. Included in this report, provided some figures for the first 4 months. Do apologise that the heading should say 24-25.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I didn't spot that before it went to the print. So, I would also say that the actual figures, I wouldn't place a lot of reliance on the sort of profit that it's showing currently. That is, it's very early in the year. It does reflect that we had quite a few vacancies. We've been on a recruitment campaign, so that those figures will reverse. So I think we are looking very much to be on track to our anticipated profit of 40,000-50,000, which is pretty much where we aim to be each year. Finally, we are asking the committee to approve a couple of items. The first is part of the new governance arrangements for the for BPS. As part of those arrangements, we've set up. We have a board, but then we have a new what we call a members committee to oversee the performance. This sort of sits between the board and the shareholder committees in each member council. And it's really there to just track performance and agree certain decisions which are reserved for the member councils, which aren't necessarily requiring shareholder committee approval, but they do, certain decisions do require all the members to be in agreement. So we're asking committee to approve Bryn as the members committee representative for York. So Debbie's the board member, but Bryn would then be the members committee representative. That's one thing. And secondly, we have had a request to join from Bradford Children and Families Trust. So they've asked if they can join as a full member. So we are talking to each of the member councils about whether they are in agreement with allowing them to join.
Okay, any questions then on the publicly published papers? Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, just that question about Bradford. There's a question of why. So given they're wholly owned by the local authority, it's not the local authority deciding to join. It's a wholly owned subsidiary, just seemed odd.
Yes, I think what we've found is that where children's trusts set up, often they look to get certain services provided externally rather than by their host council. That happened with Doncaster. We were the internal auditors for Doncaster. We are the internal auditors for Birmingham Children's Trust. And
the ones that have had problems.
Yes, I mean, children's trusts are generally set up where the council itself is failing in its provisions.
So it's giving that assurance, giving the councils for services have failed and gone to a trust. Yeah, makes sense.
Any other questions, Councillor Douglas?
So mine are on the business side, but I don't think stray into anything that's private. Just looking at the numbers for budget for 24-25, therefore, so that 12,000 reflects Q1 basically, and so over the 12-month period, roughly 4 times that is the total. So given how business is going, do you think you're being ambitious enough around this? And it doesn't seem like you're really struggling to find councils or clients that want to join up to the services that you're offering, given that you're doing such a good job. I'm just wondering if, we need to have a think about what the future might look like for this, seeing as it's going well.
Okay, I mean, effectively, the business is split into two parts. One is commercial side, where we generate profits, but the bulk of the work, the majority of the work is providing services to our member councils, and we try and deliver those at break even. We could make profits, but effectively all we'd be doing is charging our member councils more, and that probably isn't in everyone's interest.
And so are you putting any dividend back into from the not-for-profit side? Are you putting dividend back into the constituent
we wouldn't expect to make any. We will aim to break even and effectively cover our costs. If we make a surplus, it's going to be a quite small surplus. So no, we're not looking to make any sort of dividend. The Veritau Limited, which is the commercial side, will generate profits, but in part that will help support the non-profit side. At this stage, the profit part of the business is the profitable part of the business only accounts for about 20% of the overall business.
I just think it's something that we need to think about moving forward. Now you've got this vehicle, and it seems to be that you're obviously a respected provider of audit services about how we move forward with that in the best interest of everybody.
Yes, without doubt, in the future we aim to sort of drive that Veritau Limited profit making bit forward and make more profit.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions on the public papers? No. Is there anything anyone wants to ask about the private papers?
No.
No, and no, brilliant. Okay, so we will move then into the recommendations. So there are 4 recommendations. The first 2 are to note the draft accounts and the performance. And then there are 2 specific recommendations. The first one, to approve the appointment of Bryn Roberts, Director of Governance, as the Veritau Public Sector Limited Members Committee representative. And the second, to approve the admission of Bradford Children and Families Trust as a member of Veritau Public Sector Limited on a date to be agreed. Everybody?
Yeah, I'm in favour.
Yeah. Happy to approve all of those recommendations.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Max.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now move on to item 9, City of York trading update, and as Karen and Helen come up, I'm just going to remind everybody again, we've got a restricted annex to this item, so we'll do it exactly the same as the other ones. We'll discuss the public papers first, and then I'll pause and see if there are any items anyone wants to discuss in the private papers. So she'll hand over to you, Karen.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we don't yet have finalised accounts and approved by board accounts, but by the end of this month, we should have those and be able to present them to you at the next meeting. Various holidays and sickness over the summer has meant that took longer than we originally anticipated. In July, very kindly, the executive very kindly, sorry, which involved some of the people here today, agreed to CYT setting up, or CYC setting up another company alongside CYT to provide staff to the council. I've been working with legal services, Dan, and with Helen in HR to organise the formalities and templates for that. It's taken a little bit of time backwards and forwards with those, and there's one bit of information I was waiting for Dan, which she's sent to me today. So I'm hoping that in the next week we should be able to complete the registration of that new company. It's taken a little bit of time to get everything sorted. Plan is thereafter that we meet again together and agree a timetable and processes that need to flow from that. But as it stands currently, technical arrangements are such that we're anticipating that company will go live with providing to the council from the 1st of April 2025. It was to coincide with the new financial year, which makes everything a lot tidier than trying to do it a month before, which would be the alternative. So we have an outline plan within the business in terms of what we need to do. There are various legal and HR things that we also need to do, but till the company's actually set up, we can't quite start them. Okay. We're aware, as set out in the public report, of the new statutory guidance around agency children and family social workers. We don't have any people in York at the moment in that particular category. We have in the past provided lots of children and family social workers, social workers that are currently working in adult services. But we're aware certainly of our obligations there and of our obligations when we engage with second tier suppliers to make sure that they're also compliant. So that's a change in the contracts that we'll have with them. Previous speakers have spoken about the Armed Forces Covenant and care leavers. We're not members of any Armed Forces Covenant, however, we have employed Armed Forces staff previously, or Armed Forces leavers previously, for both working schools and also at City of York Council. And we have employed care leavers previously to work in City of York Council. It's something we wouldn't object to doing. Many of our roles are quite specialist. But it would be absolutely fine to open that opportunity to as many people as possible, and we're always keen to make sure that we're engaging as wider number of potential applicants as we possibly can. So that would be something that we'd be happy to look at. In terms of the good business charter, which other people talked about as well, because we're a recruitment agency, we provide staff to other businesses. The issue was at the time when we had conversations with the good business charter, the pay rates might not have been compatible with the Living Wage Foundation living wage, where staff were employed by other businesses. It was Living Wage Foundation, Living Wage compatible, but not Living Wage Foundation compatible. So we, at that stage, were waiting for them to come back to us. They were talking about introducing a good business charter light or something similar for recruitment agencies. They haven't so far come back with that, so we're still waiting. But that's something we will look at further. I think as it stands at the moment, we don't have any clients, or we have one client who is paying living wage rates rather than Living Wage Foundation rates, but most of our clients are paying minimum. I think everything else that I can possibly say is in the confidential papers, unless you've got any questions on what I've already talked about.
So we'll do questions on any public papers first. Mr. Douglas, do you have any questions on the publicly published papers?
I've got one correction for the report. I don't know whether you've spotted it as well. On page 168, the paragraph 7 says the company's board of directors compromises Karen Bull. I don't think that's what is meant as comprises.
Thank you for spotting that.
Not at all. And other than that, no, I don't.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll make that correction and make sure we don't inadvertently cause a difficulty for anyone. Okay. I think there are some things we need to talk about in the private papers. So we'll just suspend the meeting while we go. Councillor.
Just a thought. Put them a work plan first. Just do the work plan first, and then have to come back. That's possible.
Oh yes, actually, really good point. Thank you. Is there anything anyone wants to comment about on the work plan, which is item number 10? I don't have any queries about it. Nobody else does. Then we will note the work plan officially now, and as we have no urgent business, that allows us to say goodbye to anyone who's watching online and allow our team to drop the live stream and we won't have to do the complicated bit of getting it back again. And the meeting will just continue to consider the private papers. So thank you very much.